Well, good evening, everyone. My name is Bernard Siegel. I'm the Executive Director of the Regenerative Medicine Foundation and founder and co-chair of the 12th World Stem Cell Summit. I'm so delighted to welcome so many friends back to a World Stem Cell Summit. We just had a show of hands, and a lot of people in this audience at this initial plenary session, this kickoff session, have been here before, so thank you for returning. It's a special privilege for me as a founder of this meeting to see us grow every single year. We should have record attendance this year, as we now have 8 tracks in our very complex program. As you know, this is a networking meeting. It's unlike any other meeting in the world because what we do here is that we represent and provide a gathering place for our ecosystem of all those that are interested in stem cells and regenerative medicine. And back in the day when I first became an advocate, the first meeting that I went to by invitation was the founding meeting of the International Society for Stem Cell Research. And it was very special for me to be there, and I, as a patient advocate, a cancer survivor, I really believed in this important technology back in 2003. But there wasn't a single thing I understood inside the lecture halls. You know, I could speak to the 5 exhibitors that were there and to the scientists that had invited me. But I realized that in order for this field to move forward, we needed to get individuals involved, patients, because after all of us will suffer one day from something. We're all mortal, aren't we? We all have loved ones, friends that are afflicted with chronic disease or medical conditions or pain or irritations where there's no really cure. So I became, I guess, a fanatic about these amazing cells, the curative potential for regenerative medicine, the advanced technologies. And what we now have is a convergence of technologies. So a scientific revolution that in human history might have taken centuries or decades, now in our own lifetime, in this next decade, and it will impact our lives, our children, our grandchildren. It's something very, very important. So all of you who are gathered here are going to enjoy the networking aspect of the event. That's the key. Ask questions, be open with people, and break out of the silos that we are all in our chosen fields. Scientists who work with cells in a dish can actually meet a patient that suffers from ALS. An industrialist who wants to commercialize can connect with an investor, can connect with the patient, the end user, speak to someone from an insurance company to give reimbursement. FDA is in the house. We're going to hear from Celia Witten tomorrow, and we'll understand throughout this meeting the impact of the Cures Act, which may have passed the Senate today. I didn't get a chance to look it up tonight or tomorrow. And for the first time, I would submit to you that in the United States, regenerative medicine is taking its place in a way to find an accelerated pathway, something our organization worked very hard in Washington with the Bipartisan Policy Center to move forward. This is a critical time, and this is the original translational meeting. So I welcome all of you here. Before I introduce some of the representatives of the distinguished organizations that are our co-organizers for this meeting, and we're going to introduce them in 2 sets, some of them tonight and then tomorrow morning as we kick off the first full day of the summit. I wanted to talk a minute about the public day that we all experienced. I don't know how many of you were able to spend much time in the public day, but I take pride in my team. Alan Fernandez, our associate director, and the rest of my team take great pride that we were able to do this because we had about 500 to 600 attendees, 300 from the wonderful organization of Hadassah, which really supported the meeting tremendously, but also school children that prepared the wonderful artwork that you see outside because, you know, science, technology, engineering, and math, STEM, you add the A, arts, to that, STEAM, and that's what we had out there. And these were third and fourth graders that all of a sudden have something they've learned about cell biology. How amazing is that? And they were inspired by the incredible art of Eluse, that were some of the images of the cells here, and it was sponsored by some local organizations, nonprofit, Prime Time, the Center for Creative Education, and the South Florida Science Center, and we were so grateful for their support. And we think this is going to get worldwide attention to show that this is something that we're all in, to create something important that people will be enthusiastic about, because with public support, as Lincoln said, with public support you could do anything, without it nothing can get done. So as we kick off this meeting, I want to introduce you to representatives of 4 of the institutions that are co-organizing. Tomorrow we'll be hearing from the University of Miami the Stem Cell Institute, Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine, the Center for Commercialization and Research, the Center for Commercialization for Regenerative Medicine, CCRM, from Canada, Kyoto University and their Institute for Integrated Cell Material Sciences, and our friend Dr. Norio Nakasushi, who is here again, and the Cure Alliance. So we have some people we'll hear from tomorrow morning. But at this moment, first I want to introduce Dr. Thomas A. Ganwa. Dr. Ganwa is the Jorge and Leslie Bacardi Associate Director, Center for Regenerative Medicine in Florida at the Mayo Clinic, Professor of Medicine and College of Medicine. We've had a wonderful relationship over the years with the Mayo Clinic, the pathfinding institution. Their Center for Regenerative Medicine is a colossal enterprise. We have many researchers and MDs and nurses and everyone from the Mayo Clinic. We're grateful for here to have them, and some opening remarks and slides from Dr. Ganwa.
I was asked to give some introductory remarks, and if you could launch my slides, you have them back there. Mayo Clinic has been a proud sponsor of this meeting for the last several years, because Mayo Clinic has decided through its actions that regenerative medicine is the future. Now, we'll see if this works. Mayo Clinic has embraced regenerative medicine as a strategy, as a strategic investment in the future of healthcare. I'm always amazed, and maybe it's just because I'm part of Mayo, that most people don't know that Mayo actually has 3 campuses spread across the country, which gives us the breadth to do many things in 3 different geographic areas. I represent the one here in Jacksonville, just north of here, a quick 4-hour and 15-minute drive. So it's always a pleasure to come down here. And we've embraced it, and we've embraced this model, which I've showed at this meeting before, that you have to have a blueprint and you have to have all the pieces. Many people who work in regenerative medicine may work in one or another of these various places, but we try to work in all of them. We try and have a portal where patients can get in. Then we have to get all the basic scientists involved in systems biology and everything else. But we also need to have the clinicians involved so that eventually we can have the regenerative medicine programs. And these are, in order to do this, we also have to have all the platforms in place to be able to deliver the product eventually to the patient. Because at Mayo, it's all about what's best for the patient. And we've adopted this method of accelerating the research continuum, the so-called DTA, which is discovery, translation, and application. And we advance this throughout the entire clinic using the discovery toolkit. Obviously, the basic science is necessary, clinical trials, which is the translation, and finally the application to actually get it to the patient and make it part of our everyday practice. One of my jobs is to be in charge of what we call the platforms. The platforms are what we're going to need to be able to deliver product to manufacture it. Human cell therapy, everybody is familiar with. This is where all the cellular therapies are developed. This is important, and we have human cell therapy GMP facilities on all 3 campuses, Phoenix, Rochester, and Florida, so that we can deliver the product at all 3 places. But we also have built up a BioTrust, which is for iPSC cells and cell lines, located in Rochester with a branch in Florida, mainly concentrating on the neurosciences. Have huge library of cells and iPSC lines derived from patients with Alzheimer's, various types of dementias, and Parkinson's disease, both for basic research, drug discovery, and other things. A biomaterials facility located in Rochester so that we can actually put together scaffolds and products that we can use with cellular therapy to treat patients. And finally, what's now our newest one called the Advanced Product Incubator, which is tasked with finding non-cellular regenerative products. And they are working on their first 2 products now. And if you look through this, you can see the scope. We spend a lot of money and have a lot of different products along the line. This is at the foundation level. One thing Bernie was interested in is what are we doing here in Florida, so I thought I'd spend just a second talking a little bit about Florida. These are all the regenerative medicine clinical trials, either preclinical or in clinical, that are currently going on within the Mayo system. The ones that have the red stars on them are ones that patients in Florida can actually participate in. So you can see that we have a broad range and we cover a broad spectrum of medicine. In Florida alone, this is internal funding that we are using over the last 5 years since we started, and in this last year we're up to over $3.5 million in funding just in Florida to help fund this effort. The Human Cell Therapy Lab in Florida is a 1,200 square foot, 400 square feet of GMP space, has 3 full-time allied health, various platforms. Mainly we're concentrating on bone marrow and adipose-derived MSCs, exosomes, stromal vascular fraction, developing various other new therapies, and we have specialized services, and currently developing a master cell bank for manufacturing. There's 4 INDs in development, and we're currently planning to expand another 5,000 square feet of our GMP capability in Florida. These are current clinical projects that will probably be coming online in the next year, other than the ones we already have. Trials in osteoarthritis, bronchiolitis obliterans, hemorrhagic stroke, pressure ulcers, PVD, heavily involved in the development of exosomes as a therapeutic tool. The first trials will probably be in the transplant arena. GI fistula, some very interesting new neurosurgery trials using regenerative techniques. And then we just have treatment of osteoarthritis and alopecia. The other thing we've concentrated on in Jacksonville is, because we're not as big as Rochester is, it's nice to have one place where you can deliver all these therapies. So we've actually developed a regenerative medicine therapy suite. It's in the transplant center because I ran transplants, so I got to control the space. And as you can see here, we have 2 treatment rooms, which are in the front there. And in the back, there is a processing room so that we can actually take specimens from patients, take them in the back, process them, and give them right back to the patient. We have 2 rooms working at the same time. We also can process things that come from the Human Cell Therapy Lab there. And this is up and running. We opened it up about a month ago. It's actually built. These are the blueprints, and this is just kind of what it looks like. The picture on the right is the actual treatment room, and it's the back you can see looking into the 2 rooms to where the therapy can be delivered. We believe that by concentrating everything in one area, we can get better expertise and better use. Finally, just a plug, shameless. At Mayo Clinic, we'll be holding a symposium out in Arizona. For those of you with the northern climes, you might want to come visit our Phoenix campus in February. I know Bernie's going to be coming. But, I'll end there. Thank you.
How many of you ever wanted to fly in space? Our next speaker, yes, 1. I bet more of you did. If you're as old as me, you remember the Mercury program. Listen, we have, our next speaker has not only flown in space once, but twice on the Endeavour, and that's Gregory H. Johnson, the President and Executive Director of the Center for Advancement of Science in Space. They're based right here in Melbourne, Florida, but their mandate is to the stars, right? And among the things that CASIS is involved with is the commercialization of LEO, low Earth orbit. They are the managers of the U.S. National Lab on the International Space Station. So I know a few of you are wondering, well, why are they speaking at the World Stem Cell Summit, and what does this have to do with regenerative medicine? Well, it just so happens that they are providing grants for amazing cell research, mind-bending cell research. As if you listen to the Public Day presentation, you would learn the importance of microgravity and cells. And in fact, around your neck is a lanyard with the company's Zero Gravity Solutions, which is the first commercialization that's coming out of the research on the U.S. National Lab on the International Space Station that has a case study later in the program. So we're so honored that CASIS decided to be a co-organizer of this year's meeting. They have some wonderful panels scheduled, including an expert lunch tomorrow at our Conversations with Expert lunch. So Greg, thank you, thank CASIS, and say a few words.
Thank you. I'm humbled to be up here on the stage with celebrated researchers, medical doctors, PhDs, Juris Doctorate. And here I am at the World Stem Cell Summit talking to you, but representing a group, a very special group that gets to do research on the only laboratory not actually physically located on the planet. It's orbiting the Earth about 250 miles up. And so I'd like to thank you all for all the work you do. It's important to me, my family, our country, the world, and we're trying to help using the International Space Station. So the Center for the Advancement of Science and Space has a mission to manage and provide access to this very interesting and unusual vehicle in outer space. It took the country, those of you who are at the some of the different discussions in this public day, we had a talk with some local students and other lifetime learners of all ages who joined in our education mission where we talked about this wonderful asset. But the space station is obviously much more than an educational opportunity. It's a one of a kind innovation platform with facilities in space that are space versions of facilities that you all have used for years on the ground. Our part of that mission is to provide access and to think about research and technology demonstration differently than NASA. Because NASA's mission, one of its many missions, is to extend our presence outside, past low Earth orbit, to the moon or Mars or a near-Earth asteroid. But meanwhile, we also have other work to do in low Earth orbit in this one-of-a-kind facility where we can take gravity out of the equation, where researchers can look at things differently and understand and discover where gravity has shielded other phenomena that we can't experience here on the Earth, or just phenomena that are accelerated. So here at the conference, we have our CASIS team. We're a small team, but congressionally mandated to build the commercial market in low Earth orbit, to do different, to work on projects that have a different focus than what NASA has traditionally done in the past. So I could babble on and on about the space station, but I wanted to, bring up some points here, and I know that I'm kind of going over my 5 minutes. I don't have 10 slides, but I have one slide that kind of goes around and around, and it's pretty cool. But here's some thoughts for you. One, CASE's funding of stem cell research to date, we've had 5 projects, and it's really not about the funding, it's about the access. It's about the subsidized access to a unique laboratory in space. And so we've funded, we've sponsored, we've awarded, we've supported, we've facilitated 7 stem cell projects. And today, one of those projects was heart cells. And the actual beating of cardiomyocytes in space. And I see a researcher nodding in the audience. Dr. Wu from Stanford and his team saw for the first time this year beating heart cells in space. We've got a CASES talk this week. I think it's on Thursday, and I encourage you to learn more about these 7 projects that we've supported on the space station. CASES is working with NIH and NCATS on a sponsored program, a $12 million program to have tissue chips using stem cells in space. And so that solicitation is out there. And again, the value is getting the access, the allocation to get your experiment onto the space station. But I think the proposals are due about the 15th of December. CASES is working with commercial companies to find breakthrough therapies that utilize the unique environment of the International Space Station. And we all recognize, and our involvement in this conference is because we believe in in the work that you're doing, and we want to help. So if something in microgravity interests you or your research, if you want to know more about how you can get to the International Space Station, part of our secret sauce is we think we can get you there quicker. And we want to understand what you're doing and build on your discoveries. Then get to know members of the CASES team, ask questions, and let us know how we can help. So anyway, thank you very much for being here. We're excited about the opportunity. The agenda looks very interesting and fruitful, and enjoy the week.
A long, long time ago, back in 2003, I had an idea that there was something more interesting than practicing law. It was to create a nonprofit organization to advance the field of stem cell research. It started off as the Genetics Policy Institute, later merged with another nonprofit that was founded by Dr. Tony Atala, called the Regenerative Medicine Foundation. So we've adopted that name. It better describes what we do. But as I was assembling a science advisory board for that organization back in 2003, the initial scientists that were engaged were Ian Wilmot, Dolly the sheep's father, and Dr. Rudolf Janisch, Lasker Award winner and prominent research at MIT. But as I was researching the field, it was recommended that I reach out to someone in Miami, where I was at the time, by the name of Dr. Camillo Riccordi at the Diabetes Research Institute. And I remember how nervous I was because I worked with this longtime assistant, Mabel, and actually had an appointment with Dr. Riccordi, and I didn't know that much about diabetes, and I explained to him my passion and what I was going to do, and he became the 3rd member of the Science Advisory Board of the then Genetics Policy Institute. Over the years, Camillo and I have worked together very closely on numerous projects. Our first meeting actually was at the United Nations, and Camillo spoke at that meeting in 2004. And the work that he does extends beyond, of course, the Diabetes Research Institute, where as scientific director, he's the Stacy and Joy Goodman Professor of Surgery, Distinguished Professor of Medicine, Professor of Biomedical Engineering, Microbiology and Immunology, Director, Diabetes Research Institute and Cellular Transplantation. He also found time to create an advocacy organization, the Cure Alliance. Well, Camillo and the Diabetes Research Institute Foundation for the second time are co-organizers of the meeting, and Camilla will be honored later tomorrow night with the Stem Cell Action Advocacy Award. So I want to invite my friend up, Dr. Camilla Ricordi.
Thank you, Bernie. That was my talk. Thank you very much for having me. Well, actually, it's a great pleasure to be here again, and I'm so pleased to see the evolution of space, laboratory, and science, because I started, believe it or not, in '84 in St. Louis at Washington University with Paul Lacey's group, and we had this big partnership with McDonnell Douglas Corporation that had the original technology to isolate islets from the human pancreas, and was the time where there were the first space shuttle experiment on microgravity of islet cell culture. And then I ruined the whole partnership because I developed the automated method for islet isolation from the human pancreas, and they split the partnership with McDonnell Douglas Corporation, and then we switched to what is the procedure that is still used today in clinical trials of islet transplantation. But has been a tremendous path towards the cure of diabetes, and I'm so privileged to be directing the Diabetes Research Institute and the Cell Transplant Center at the University of Miami, where we were able to start a new model, an affiliation agreement with the university, but that allow us to plan a strategic plan around patients and the development of a cure and remain focused on the strategic objective of the Institute. So I will not tell you about our programs because you can visit. There is a booth both for the Diabetes Research Institute with all the outline of our programs, as well as one for the Cure Alliance, that is an organization that I started a few years later. But what I would like to bring you is the concept that was quite disruptive 20 years ago when we started, but now it's becoming mainstream. That is the fact that if you keep patients and the development of cures at the center of your strategic mission, every decision step becomes clear. So you have to collaborate. There is no silos. There is no ivory towers. There is no big center institute. You have to open the way and break the barriers, the geographical barriers to scientific collaboration. We started in the diabetes area with a network of over 30 centers worldwide, now comprising the Diabetes Research Institute Federation, and we carry out trials not only to favor international collaboration, but also to try to overcome and resolve some of the barriers to clinical translation that time to time you can encounter in the United States or in other countries. So that one of these big challenges is the cost of doing clinical research in the US. So an islet transplant here costs over $200,000, in Canada $20,000, in Italy €30,000, in China $10,000. So that by working as a federation of centers with the same standards, the same IND, the same regulatory control and oversight, but we can capitalize on, if you have only 10 million a year to carry on clinical trials, you can do more if you work as a team worldwide, not just within your own institution. And then we expanded this model to the Cure Alliance, that is, we just became a 501c3 this year, and now a little over 50,000 supporters worldwide, but is extending the concept of diabetes. We can use the same system of telescience platform technology, try to collaborate worldwide, open access for other disease conditions to try to speed up and try to reach a cure in the fastest, most efficient, and safest way possible. So these are some of the themes that we will discuss also during this Congress. And for me, it's been a tremendous privilege to be working with Bernie and seeing the evolution of this conference to, from a small team to this major event now worldwide, with so many followers also internationally and through webcast. So it's really a pleasure and an honor to be here, and thank you very much for being here.
Well, there's a new university that has joined us as a co-organizer of the World Stem Cell Summit, Nova Southeastern University and their Cell Therapy Institute. You might not be as familiar with Nova Southeastern University, but if you live in South Florida, in the state of Florida, you understand it is an enormous private university with very successful graduate schools. And now it's really exciting to see the work that they're doing in cell therapies. Leading the institute is Dr. Richard Jove. Richard, I first met when we did a World Stem Cell Summit in Pasadena, California. And he was the scientific director and the head of the Beckman Research Institute at City of Hope. And the City of Hope, 2 years, joined us as a co-organizer of the summit. Rich is an amazing builder of institutes. He was in charge of science at the Moffitt Center, built the Beckman Research Institute in the City of Hope. And his journey has continued to Florida, where now he's at Nova Southeastern University. I like to think that his affiliation with us might have been a small, tiny lure that might have attracted him to Florida when the City of Hope was a co-organizer at our meeting here in 2012. So Rich brings with him a relationship, a strong relationship with the Karolinska Institute in Sweden, and we have many fine researchers from the Karolinska that have an affiliation with Nova Southeastern here at the meeting and speaking at the meeting and attending. So these are folks you definitely want to meet. So let me introduce Richard Jove.
Thank you, Bernie, for your kind words. I do remember very clearly back in Pasadena when we were involved in co-sponsoring the World Stem Cell Summit at that time. Those were the early days of the World Stem Cell Summit. And I have to say, I think I've attended just about every single one since then, and I've seen the tremendous growth of the World Stem Cell Summit. And I have to say, I can't think of any other single person in this field who has done more to advance the cause of stem cell therapy and regenerative medicine than Bernie. So I'm very pleased to say a few words. Now, I didn't have enough wine, so I'm going to have to read this, okay? First of all, I want to add my thanks to Bernie and colleagues, everyone who worked very hard for organizing yet another magnificent World Stem Cell Summit. As you heard and you all know, this is truly a unique conference in bringing together patients, physicians, scientists, investors, and other major stakeholders, including astronauts, who share a common mission to accelerate the development of next-generation cell-based therapies. That's what we're all about here. As you heard, Nova Southeastern recently made a major commitment to biomedical research, and that is why I'm here as director of the Cell Therapy Institute, which is about a year old. And particularly with the opening of the new biomedical research building at Nova called the Center for Collaborative Research, which is a mix of for-profit and non-profit research entities. So I think that's a harbinger of what's to come in the future, this close collaboration among academia and industry. So also, as Bernie mentioned, the Cell Therapy Institute is also a close collaboration with our colleagues at the Karolinska Institute in Stockholm, Sweden. We're very honored and privileged to be working with our colleagues, many of whom are here at this meeting giving talks. So in conclusion, Nova is a proud sponsor of the summit, and we will contribute increasingly to the cell therapies mission. Thank you all very much for being here, and have a wonderful time.
Thank you so much. You gentlemen can leave the podium. Thank you. You can leave, yes. Yes, you can leave. You can now leave the stage. Let's give a round of applause. Everyone likes to have a round of applause when they leave the stage. Did you know that the Regenerative Medicine Foundation has an official partnership? Our official journal is the Journal Stem Cells Translational Medicine of AlphaMed Press. And tomorrow, if you haven't picked up already in your conference bag, there will be a World Stem Cell Report 2016, some of the best of the Journal of Stem Cell Translational Medicine, whose editor-in-chief is Dr. Tony Atala. So we're very pleased that we have this publication again to give you. It gives a bird's eye view of some of the great happenings in our field. Well, we have one other speaker this evening who is going to be recognized tomorrow evening with a Stem Cell Action Inspiration Award. As many of you know, the Regenerative Medicine Foundation had major outreach related to something called the Regrow Act, a visionary view of how we might be able to have a conditional pathway for FDA approvals of cell therapies. It's my worldview, our worldview, that if we treat everything as drugs and have to spend $1 billion or $1.5 billion in 10 or 15 years, we may never reap the benefits of these curative technologies. So our work with the Regrow Act and the Bipartisan Policy Center, a wonderful 501c3 organization in Washington, led us to do a conference in April where we presented scientists, patient advocates, some industry leaders to be able to understand the scope of what an accelerated pathway might mean. Of course, we're thrilled that this week the Cures Act is passing both houses of Congress, the Senate perhaps today or tomorrow. I'm not sure, I didn't get a chance to check the news. But there is in the Cures Act an accelerated pathway in recognition of regenerative medicine as it takes its place with drugs and biologics as a way to have a pathway forward to move things under the guidance, of course, and of the Food and Drug Administration. Well, one of the speakers at that meeting in April was Sandy Barker. Sandy and her husband Gary suffered the loss of a child. And it's a very, very moving story. But Sandy has taken that loss, as many people do, and has decided to become an advocate for pediatric cancer awareness and cures, the Gold Rush Cure Foundation. And her story was so compelling, and her mom, Jenny, is in the audience here today. Hi, Jenny. That I wanted her to share as the kickoff keynote address a little bit to tell us a little bit about her experiences. Let's face it, we're all in here for patients. We're all in here for a reason. Even the equine track is here for a good reason, because large animal studies have human implications. It's all important work. So I want you to give a warm round of applause to a wonderful person and a wonderful speaker, Sandy Barker. Sandy, the platform is yours.
Well, I didn't have wine either, so I have to read some of mine. But I'll get through this because I have a lot of people praying for me. Hi, my name is Sandy Barker, and I will be speaking about why we advocate for stem cell therapy and regenerative medicine. When I saw the list of speakers, I was in awe. There's some incredible people here. And while I felt a bit like I was crashing the party maybe, I realized that it is important for people to hear a patient advocate's perspective. I've been a patient advocate in DC many, many times. I have my 20th trip coming up in February, since my son passed away almost 9 years ago. But I have only talked about what I'm going to talk about tonight one other time. And that was when I was a panelist for the Bipartisan Policy Center to introduce the Regrow Act last April. Speaking about this subject is very difficult. It's very personal. So forgive me if I have to stop here and there. But I feel like it's important because it really does highlight the urgent need for all of us to advocate in moving medicine forward, namely through regenerative cell therapy. I'd like to tell you about my family's difficult journey that started 10.5 years ago. My husband, Gary, and I live in California, and we have 3 children, Christian, Garrett, and Kendall. Christian is our oldest son. We were a normal family like many of your families. Then on May 7th, 2006, Christian was diagnosed with an extremely rare and aggressive form of childhood cancer known as hypodiploid acute lymphoblastic leukemia. We were told by his doctors that his only chance of survival would be to have a bone marrow transplant. So after having a meltdown and realizing that was counterproductive, I started researching. And I researched centers of excellence for bone marrow transplant throughout the United States. And there were a lot of great treatment centers. We elected to have Christian's bone marrow transplant done at Seattle Cancer Care Alliance or Fred Hutchinson Cancer Research Center in Seattle. The doctors chose to use my son Garrett to be the donor. Both of my kids were donor matches. And they chose to use Garrett to be the donor because he was a little bit older. So we went to Seattle to have the transplant done, and it was really hard. Those of you who know about bone marrow transplant, it's very, very difficult, especially since our family was separated. I was in Seattle with Christian, and my husband was at home with Garrett and Kendall, and they would fly back and forth, and my awesome mom stayed home with my kids. But we endured it with the hope that this would eradicate his cancer forever. And after his day 100 testing, we came home thankful for our healed son. Unfortunately, only 6 weeks after we returned home, I noticed petechiae on Christian's hands and feet, and my heart sunk. I knew that petechiae was a symptom of low platelets, and low platelets was a symptom of relapse. So I took him to the oncologist the next day and just pleaded for her to tell me this wasn't true. And after some testing, it was confirmed that he had already relapsed. So we started chemo in our home state, and it was very difficult for him to get back in remission. After some intensive chemo, he did finally reach remission, and we flew back to Seattle for a second bone marrow transplant. This time, we used a non-related donor since he had relapsed so quickly with a related match. The second bone marrow transplant was even harder than the first one. But Christian endured it because he wanted to live so badly. We found out before his day 100 testing that his cancer was already back again. We were devastated. The bone marrow transplant doctors decided to reduce his immunosuppressants, his prednisone, hoping for some graft versus leukemia, which he got, but this is also when his graft versus host disease started. Christian's doctors work really hard at trying to balance the prednisone and increase it little by little and keep the graft versus host disease from progressing, but it didn't work. Even though he ended up being on massive amounts of prednisone, the graft versus host disease wreaked havoc on his body, especially his gut, his liver, and his skin. Christian became prednisone refractory, and all other graft versus host disease therapies didn't work. So his doctors petitioned for a compassionate use exception for prochimal, which are mesenchymal stem cells. We were made aware of this therapy when a very good friend of ours contacted Dr. Randy Mills, who at the time was the CEO of Osiris, who was the maker of Prochymal. Dr. Mills went above and beyond trying to get the approval for our son and trying to save Christian's life. I'll be grateful to him forever. Dr. Mills and Christian's doctors worked really hard trying to get the Prochymal approved. It was delayed a bit in the internal review board, but then it was approved. Then, when the request was made to the FDA, they denied it, stating that Seattle had already had one compassionate use exception and they wouldn't grant him another one, even though they knew how dire the situation was. We were devastated, as was Dr. Mills and Christian's doctors. So the doctors ended up opening a clinical trial for Christian so that he could attain access to the Prochymal. But this all took time that Christian didn't have. When Christian finally did get the Prochymal, it was too late. We watched Christian's body being ravaged by the graft versus host disease. Every day was worse than the prior. He was in horrific pain. And he was vomiting and stooling up to 4 liters of blood a day. His room literally looked like a crime scene. There are no adjectives to describe the helpless feeling of watching your child suffer so badly. The fear on their face. From seeing all the blood. And their body being destroyed by a disease that may have a cure, but not being given access to that cure. It was nothing short of hell. When Christian finally did get the Prochymal, like I said, it was too late. He ended up coding on Christmas morning, 2007, and he was resuscitated. We were told by the doctors Christmas morning that he would die soon. Christmas Day, we signed his DNR papers. And as hard as he tried to hold on, he died on December 29th, 2007, after a brutal 20-month battle that included over 16 months inpatient, 2 bone marrow transplants, 3 relapses, tons of chemo, total body radiation, surgeries, procedures, and finally, liver failure caused by graft versus host disease. Christian was cancer-free when he died. The World Stem Cell Summit focuses on stem cell therapy and regenerative medicine. I'd like to talk about my perspective on stem cell therapy and the role that it may have played in my son's treatment. Regarding the mesenchymal stem cell therapy, I truly believe that Christian's graft versus host disease would have never progressed to the state it did had he been given the therapy when it was requested. I'm still in close contact with his main Seattle Cancer Care Alliance doctors, and I know that they have used Prochymal for, I believe, 7 other patients who were prednisone refractory, not responding to other graft versus host disease therapies, which there are very few, and headed down the same path as Christian. And every one of those children had their graft versus host disease reversed, and they're alive today. And that's only one doctor. I know there are other doctors who have had the same good outcomes with the Prochymal. Cell therapy works. It doesn't mask symptoms with potentially harmful treatments. It heals. I want to personally thank every individual and company who I'm sure works tirelessly trying to advance cell therapy. Being part of the World Stem Cell Summit gives me hope seeing so many individuals and companies working so diligently to advance this area of medicine. It's exciting to see the progression of therapies because they're extremely effective. They cross over to so many different diseases and illnesses, and they can help so many people. Now, we need to continue advancing stem cell research and regenerative medicine, as well as make these therapies readily available to the people who need them now. I'd like to share with you what led me to make the trek from California to Florida and why stem cell therapy is so important to me. First of all, this hits too close to home. There's no way I couldn't come. I truly believe in stem cell therapy, and I work really hard trying to advocate for it because I know there are so many people who need it now. Many treatment plans being utilized today are either ineffective or super toxic. Christian did everything that was asked of him because he wanted to live so badly. He literally fought till he took his last breath. But he was denied the tools that may have been able to eradicate what caused him so much suffering and what ended up taking his life. My son's case was not an isolated situation. My husband Gary and I founded Gold Rush Cure Foundation, which is a childhood cancer nonprofit, after Christian died. Our focus is advocacy and patient support. One of the ways that we support patients is by mentoring families who have a child diagnosed with cancer. And I have heard stories from distraught parents that are desperately looking for a more effective, less toxic treatment for their child, and they're unable to find it. I've also heard stories from parents who aren't able to attain approval for promising cell therapies that they did find for their child who's suffering from either the cancer or the toxic ramifications of the treatment. I know the FDA has a huge job. And I know there have been improvements in the compassionate use acceptance rate, which is wonderful. Believe me, no one's happier to hear that than me. But there are still so many people being denied access to therapies that they need. I don't want others to have to suffer through what we went through. It doesn't have to be this way. I find it ridiculous that people are going out of the country to gain access to therapies where the safety and efficacy has already been proven because they can't gain access to them in the United States. But I'm afraid things won't change unless we advocate for it. If we want to move medicine to the 21st century, we all need to join forces by letting our voices be heard. Fortunately, that doesn't mean you have to go to DC all the time like I do. There are several wonderful organizations and foundations and companies who lead efforts to improve the state of regenerative medicine. There is power in numbers, and it is attainable. Some advocacy efforts are welcomed by House Senate members with open arms. They're super, super supportive. Sometimes they're not. There are several House and Senate members that we love because they are so supportive. And there are other House and Senate members that we don't love so much, but we don't give up. I'd like to tell you about one of my advocacy stories. Like I said, I'm going on 20 trips. I probably met with one House member in particular about 15 times. And one of my early trips, it was, I believe, to introduce the Childhood Cancer Caucus. And what I always do when I'm meeting with a member is introduce myself. Now I know a lot of them, but I tell them why I'm there. I educate them about the bill or caucus or whatever we're introducing. So this particular member, I said, this is why I'm here. This is bipartisan, it's bicameral, there are no appropriations attached to it, thinking we're gonna get 2 thumbs up. And he said, I won't support this, nor will I ever support anything that's disease specific because I don't earmark. Sorry, I meant to move that, there we go. So I thought, I'll work on him. So several trips later, he will not support any disease-specific drug because it's earmarking. And he's told me, if I support this, I'm going to have some other, illness that comes to me, well, you supported that, not this. And he's not alone. There are other members that are the same way. So when I came to DC to introduce the Regrow Act last April, I was really, really excited because I thought, oh my gosh, this has his name all over it, and a lot of other members as well. It's the Regrow Act, like Bernie said, is encouraging the FDA to restructure the approval process, kind of a fast track of it, and make stem cell therapies more available to the people who really need them. So when I met with him, I said, okay, I've got the perfect bill for you to pass, or for you to support. And I told him about it, and I said, I probably wouldn't have done this if it was my first or second trip, but you get a little more gutsy each time you go. And so I said, I think this is a great one for you to support. And actually, not only do I want you to support it, I want you to co-sponsor this bill. And it shocked me a little bit, he co-sponsored it. So, you always want to ask. Yeah. So advocating sometimes does take thick skin, but it's necessary and important for progression to happen. You never know who you'll get through to. I mean, even people that have told you no a ton of times, sometimes you will. Regarding why I do advocacy work, it's very necessary. It's very necessary. And I've seen too much, and I've certainly lost too much to not do something. Also, I have met some of the most amazing, passionate, driven people in my advocacy trips to DC. I can tell you, there's no greater advocate than someone fighting for a cure for somebody they love. I have the deepest, deepest respect for my fellow advocates. Speaking of what passionate advocates are capable of doing, Bernie mentioned this. This was just released Wednesday in the media. After 3 years of wrangling the House on Wednesday, November 30th, the House passed a $6.3 billion bill that would dramatically overhaul the way drugs are approved in the United States. 21st Century Cure Act is a bipartisan effort that's been in the works since April 2014. The idea behind the bill is that the Food and Drug Administration, their current approval process is clunky and out of date, delaying potentially life-saving drug devices from reaching the patients who need them. This bill aims to modernize the process, accelerate drug and device innovation by boosting funding for research and get cures on the market faster. Patient advocacy groups, drug and device companies, and more than 1,400 lobbyists have pushed for this bill's passage over the last several years. This is the first step to this happening, but it's super exciting. Going to DC to advocate and raise awareness for children fighting cancer and any other disease is definitely a marathon, not a sprint. But that's not to say that powerful opportunities to speed things up don't exist. That's why I'm so passionate about regenerative cell therapy. This is one example of achieving research gains that previously have been perceived as impossible. There's so much indication that cures are definitely plausible through research. It's a powerful message to take to our members and our federal agencies, but it's got to be followed up with educated and motivated advocacy. This is where you guys could come in. There's a lot of examples. I'm going to give you one. Children with cancer and people with rare diseases are unique. They face a battle that many in the public don't understand, including our lawmakers, but they're often overlooked. Through regenerative cell therapy and stem cell research, we have the opportunity to change the message about childhood cancer and other rare diseases, and believe that there truly could be breakthroughs that remove traditional and often ineffective and super toxic treatments of the past. This message has to be delivered by people who make these decisions. If federal agencies and Congress know about the promise for innovative therapies like that example of the House member that I spoke of earlier. Once we educate these members about this, then I know we have a chance to pass some of these bills and get more research, that kind of thing. Knowing that there's an option to cure our children and our adults through these modern answers gives me hope that we can push through the difficulty and objections to those who either don't understand or are afraid of the risks. I have a few takeaways that I would like to share with you, and what I'm hopeful will happen with regarding advocating for regenerative cell therapy. So this is kind of true. Cancer definitely brought me to my knees more times than I could count while my son was battling cancer. But it's also brought me to my feet to advocate for those who deserve and desperately need better therapies, but aren't able to advocate for them themselves. I challenge each company and representative here to look at how you can help advocates like me be more empowered and educated, and offer a path forward to those who desperately need it. By looking at how you can be part of the solution, as well as how we can bring research innovation to the bedsides of those who need cures now, will improve the lives of everyone. I also want to speak to the companies and organizations who financially invest in these treatments. We need you. We have to find a way to keep going, and that should and could include partnerships with federal agencies and efforts in Congress. Continue to communicate with advocates and ask them for their help to secure a path forward. We are a driven group. Utilize us. And as a parent and a founder of a patient assistance foundation, I know how much this matters. Advocacy is vital if we want to make a change. And it needs to start now, because patients can't afford to wait. Patients are suffering and dying now. They need treatments now. There needs to be more advancement in stem cell research and an improved approval process to help people and families who desperately need this. This can happen if we all make our voices heard. My hope is that the legislative leaders will see the vital need for improvement for stem cell research and regenerative medicine by hearing stories like mine. I am here representing so many people. This is not about my son and my family. I'm representing so many people. My question to all of you is this: if your child or mother or father or brother, sister, loved one, friend had an illness and there is a therapy that may improve their quality of life, may cure their illness, and may even save their life, wouldn't you want that for them now? And wouldn't you want research to continue to progress for treatment for that? We do have this available to us, but we need the FDA and our legislative leaders to help us advance technology and make them available to those whose quality of life or life depends on it. It's too late for my son, Christian, but it isn't too late for the numerous people with various different medical conditions who could be helped by stem cell therapy. I don't want other kids and adults to have to suffer and die like my son did. There are also countless other people who aren't even diagnosed with their illness yet. It could be someone you love or I love. This is what motivates me and my foundation to advocate for stem cell research and regenerative cell medicine. I urge you to please join our efforts. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Sandy. That was an incredible talk, very inspiring to all of us here from our heart. And we'll be many of us will be watching you receive an Inspiration Award tomorrow night at the Stem Cell Action Award dinner. that you richly deserve. I want to thank all of you for attending this evening's session. We've not done this before, kicked off the meeting in the evening, but I think we've all learned something here. I look forward to seeing you over the next 3 days. If you were planning to leave early, cancel the flight and extend it, because this meeting is an incredible meeting. It's an opportunity for you to learn, to forge collaborations, expand your knowledge, and hopefully deliver cures. Thank you, and I'll see you tomorrow morning.